Hello again, my Algebra 2 friends. This is the second half of the 1.4 lesson. So in this lesson, we're going to do something that is really vital to your science experience in your science classes, and it's isolating variables and rewriting equations for a certain variable. So it's going to feel a lot like equation solving, but it almost feels less productive because you don't actually get like a singular solution like we were doing on the previous lesson, and we're just moving terms around. I personally really like this lesson. And once you get the hang of it, you might find it's even easier than equation solving, simply because you have less work to do. You're not in charge of finding an answer, right? So I'm going to keep my equation line. That'll help me keep things, straight, left side, right side. And then this question, they want you to solve for y. So this is kind of spaced out weird, but sorry about that. I want you to, if you have a highlighter or something that's non-pencil colored handy, I want you to highlight what you're trying to solve for, which in our case is this y, and that's kind of like locking it down. Why is that highlighter so pale? Oh well. So anything that's attached to the y on the y side of the equation needs to take a hike, basically. So the 7x term needs to move. 7x is all one term. It's being added to y. It's positive, so we would be subtracting it over to the other side. I know this feels weird, but that's what we're doing, right? Just moving it over. Now in algebra solving, usually you would come up with an answer right here. You would say y equals, and then you'd have an answer. But look at what you have. In fact, read it aloud. You have 8 minus 7x. So write it down. Just what you just read is what you need to write down. Your job was to get y by itself, and you did. That's all you need to do in this question. I know it seems too simple, like there must be something wrong. This is where the teacher tricks me. There will be some more complicated stuff coming up, but this first one, it was meant to be kind of easy. It's so easy, it's weird. All right, so we're going to be solving this interest formula, I equals P times R times T. We're solving it for T. So I'm going to use a different color highlighter. I don't like that yellow. Not real. All right, well, whatever. I'm trying to lock down that T. And I'm going to use that line tool again, because let's keep it consistent. So if I'm trying to solve for t, the p and the r need to move away from it, and they're being attached with multiplication, so the opposite of that would be to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides, and you can do them at the same time because it's the same operation. I'm going to divide by pr. They're canceling over here on the right side, and on the left side, you just need to read me what you have. You have I divided by pr. I don't like the way the I looks, so I'm going to make a weird I. I over pr equals t. So really stop and think about, okay, well, what do they want from me? They just want the formula rearranged. That's all they're asking for here on these questions. All right, let's take a look at some other ones. So this one, they want you to solve for x, and I think we'll be able to do that, but it's going to take us a couple of steps this time. So there's my equation line. I'm going to lock down the x, maybe. See if the fuchsia works better. It didn't work better. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is this 9y term. I'm going to move the whole term over. I'm going to add 9y. And again, read what you have. This is canceling, right? I'm going to cross that off. We have 11x equals, so read it, guys. You have negative 4 plus 9y. Now, I'll be honest, that was a little weird. I should have written 9y minus 4, but they didn't say make it pretty. They just said isolate, right? So I have one more step here. This is 11 times x. So to solve for x, I'm going to divide both sides by 11. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with you keeping that exactly how it looks and writing down x equals negative 4 plus 9y over 11. Most kids don't like the way that looks, so they'll at least change the order on the numerator. They'll say 9y minus 4 over 11. Or you could even break it up and take the 11 and divide each term separately by 11. So they might say like 9 over 11y minus 4 over 11. So literally it's like this version, this version, this version. So you'll notice on some of the answer keys that I post for y'all, it has like one version of the answer, and it's like, or anything equivalent. So if you're not sure if you're equivalent, just ask, and we'll be able to tell you if you're doing okay. All right, number 4. Oh, now it's going to get weird. Remember you were worried about it was going to get weird? Yeah, it got weird. Here we go. I'm trying to solve for y. So I'm supposed to lock down the y, and you'll notice what I just said was the y. Well, there's not just one y in this problem. xy minus y, those aren't even like terms. I can't collect them. I can't add them or subtract them together because we have an x times y versus a y. So like, what do we do now? So you're going to want to write a big note to yourself. You are going to factor. That is supposed to say factor. Okay, so right here, all the things that have y's in them are at least grouped to one side of the equation. That's good. Now what we're going to do is, instead of keeping the y in the problem, we're going to factor the y out of the problem. Okay? So if I take a y out of that problem, just on that side, think about what happens if you were to divide each of these by a y. Because that's what factoring out means. It means to divide. So right here, you're going to be left with the y's will cancel, so you still have an x. And then y divided by y, they do cancel, but there's still going to be a 1 there, so minus 1. So what we just did, that factoring thing, some kids call it undistribute. And most definitely is the worst and weirdest part of the lesson today. You're like, what? How did I know to do that? Well, because you're going to practice this a whole bunch, and then you'll recognize when you have to. Now you can lock down that y, right? I keep asking you to lock down the variable that we're trying to solve for. So good news, you can do that now. Let me lock it down with a really boring pale yellow. Yuck. All right, now look carefully. How is this y and this parentheses set attached? They're attached with multiplication. So in order to move that x plus 1 over, you would have to do the opposite of multiplying, which we know is to divide. So we're going to divide by the x minus 1, and you're going to have to do it to both sides because that's math, right? And now you're done. So this skill that we just used right now, I don't know why I wrote that so far over, of isolating, it shows up a ton in science class, and it will show up in our class repeatedly throughout the course. And of course in any math courses that come up. Weird, right? So if we think about our steps there, we factored and then we divided by whatever was still being multiplied, next to that factorization. That was a sneaky little trick there, sorry. I think we're going to have the same issue here, but we have another issue, the fact that the a's aren't even on the same side of the equation. Like, that's going to give me a problem. So before we do that fancy factoring thing, we're going to need to group them together. So I would write a little note to yourself on the side of this problem. The first thing you need to do is group. Wow, I can't spell. Right? Group. Some kids call this the rearranging step. So anything, any term that has an a in it, I want it to be on one side of the equation, and anything that does not have an a has to be on the opposite side of the equation. So a quick, easy way for us to do that would be to take this 5a and move it over here. And remember, 5a is like a single term. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, why? Because you're trying to solve for a. Now on this left side, read it. Read it to yourself. ab minus 5a. Those aren't like terms. So then kids ask me, well, what do I write down? And I say exactly what you just told me. So ab minus 5a. These 5a's are gone, right? They canceled out. And then you have a plus 4. Don't write plus 4, just write 4. Okay, step 2. Now that the a's are all together on their own side of the equation, now you're going to do that neat thing where you factor. Remember, we called this undistribute. We're going to do a lot of factoring in this class. This is just one case. So notice there's a common a here and here that you could take out of the problem. And if you were to factor out the a, you still have a b. I think it really helps some of you if you literally write down a divide by a here and here. You still have a b minus 5. And then this still equals 4. All right, last step. You're going to divide. Here goes. All right. So a times b minus 5, if you want to isolate that a, you're going to divide by b minus 5. If you want to keep parentheses around the b minus 5, that is totally fine. All right, notice the b minus 5s will be canceling here, and we be done. A equals 4 over b minus 5. That's kind of as nasty as it gets, really. So those questions, and you'll get better at recognizing them when they show up in your homework, but you got multiples of your target variable. They're all over the place, so you got to group them together. And then if they can't combine, you need to factor it out. Excuse me, I had Chipotle for dinner. And then divide both sides by whatever that factor is. Sorry about that. All right. This one bothers me simply because like it's stuck in a fraction, and y'all know how I feel about fractions. I don't really enjoy having them in my work unless I need them, and I don't need them. So a fraction, really just a division question, right? You could think of this as cross multiplication problem like we did on the previous lesson, or you could say, okay, I want to undo a divide by 5, which means I would multiply by 5. But of course, both sides of the equation, right? So over here on this side, the 5s will end up canceling, and you still have a b plus 3a, but the good news is you no longer have a denominator other than a 1. And then 4 times 5 is a 20. Oh, I forgot to highlight and lock it down. We're trying to solve for b, and there's only one b in the whole problem, and it's right here. So final step here, we're going to subtract the 3a. And our job is not to get a singular solution. Our job is to get a rearranged formula. So b equals, this is gone, and then just read it, guys. You say, what do I have? What do I write down? And your job is to read it, 20 minus 3a. Now, if you wrote down negative 3a plus 20, totally fine. Very equivalent. All right, so that's the idea here, and your science teachers love this skill because your science teachers give you some crazy formulas, and they don't ask you to like solve them once, twice, 3 times. They make you solve them like a whole bunch. So rather than doing all of that math 10 times, they say rearrange the equation once and then plug the numbers in, one after another, and you'll be able to get your answers a lot faster and easier. And they're right. It is a really useful skill in science and in math. All right, a little blast from the past in geometry. If you have a pyramid, this particular pyramid has a, well, I guess it's a parallelogram base. Kind of thinking it's a rectangle base, but whatever. Could be a square, who knows? And remember in geometry, they're all kind of different. Like every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. So it doesn't matter. The idea here is for this pyramid, the volume formula is 1/3, and then whatever the length is times the width, and then times the height of the pyramid. That would be the formula for volume. So the first thing they want me to do is isolate the height. So we're going to lock down the height. Ooh, bully, fraction again. So I think about, what would I do to, quote, get rid of that fraction? And the idea is 1/3 is like dividing by 3, so I would multiply by 3, or I'd multiply by his reciprocal. So this side of the equation gets multiplied by 3, which means this side of the equation also gets multiplied by 3. So right now we've got 3v equals, the 1/3 and 3 will cancel, and then L times W times H. And I locked down H, remember? All right, we're almost home free, guys. We got L times W. It's a multiplication that's attached to the H, so we got to move it over with division. Since it's the same operation, you can do it all at once. So we're going to divide by LW, and we're going to divide by LW over yonder as well. So what we just found is an equation for H. These are gone, right? So the height is equal to 3 times the volume divided by the length times the width. Your geometry teacher probably called the length times the width the area of the base, if it's a parallelogram like that, and absolutely correct. All right, so now we're going to use that formula, which I need to write over here. It was 3v over L times W. And we're going to figure out the height with these various clues, right? So a volume of 240, a length of 10, and a, whoops, where's my pen? Like disappeared on me. Time out. Okay, like I was saying, a width of 9. My pen gets a little temperamental on my tablet. All right, here we go. So H equals, oh, for Pete's sake. All right, so I'm supposed to multiply 3 times 240 up here. And then I'm supposed to divide it by 10 times 9.
Oh boy. You saw it, guys. I put 90 and not a 9. So I don't have the editing capabilities to actually fix this video. But just so y'all know, it's supposed to be 9, not 90. The answer is still 8, though. I think what happened is my brain was thinking ahead. That happens sometimes. Alright, y'all got the right answer now. You're good.
And while some of that could be done in my head, it's too late in my night for me to be doing any of that in my head. So you can just multiply that on your calculator and divide it using parentheses like I did there. The only trouble is, can I type? Oh, it's 8. That's nice. So the height is 8, and the label here would be centimeters for the height. Beautiful. So if my teacher gave me like a whole bunch of questions where, here's 17 different pyramids, find the height for all of them, rather than doing all those steps 17 times, it's all ready for me. That formula is all ready. Okay. So there's your lesson on 1.4, part 2, rewriting and isolating variables. Please practice this lesson. This one, for some reason, really can trip kids up if they don't practice it, because there's not like a one way to do every single question. You have to be a little flexible and have a little bit of intuition as to how to approach a question, and that only comes with practice. So good luck, everybody.